Good evening and welcome to this workshop of the Board of Education of Anne Arundel County. Tonight, the board will hear a summary of experiences and issues related to the COVID-19 pandemic from the superintendent and Anne Arundel County Public School staff. Tonight's workshop is open to the public, but no public questions or comments will be taken. This workshop is being broadcast live on AACPS TV, which can be found on Channel 96 on Comcast and Astound and Channel 36 on Verizon. High definition broadcast can be seen on Channel 996 on Comcast, Channel 496 on Astound, and Channel 2136 on Verizon. The workshop can also be viewed live on AACPS's YouTube channel. So thank you for joining us this evening. Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. President. The school board requested that the administration present a post-pandemic report several months ago. And when this request came about, one of the things that I had shared with the board was that we needed some time to make sure that we could put together a presentation that would be comprehensive in nature, that would talk about how we spent the resources, what was some of the positives in terms of the experiences we went through, what were some of the things that we didn't necessarily do well with, and where are we now as a result? What does comparable data look like as a result of this process? But most importantly, to me, where do we go as we move forward in a post-pandemic era? And so today you will have an opportunity to hear from both our Chief Academic Officer, Christina Catalano, who will take us through a lot of the academic aspects of COVID, and then Matthew Stansky, our Chief Financial Officer, who will talk about how resources were utilized during those years. And so I'll pass it over to them to get us into this workshop.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Bedell. President Silkworth, members of the board. For the record, Matt Stansky, Chief Financial Officer.
Christina Catalano, Chief Academic Officer.
All right. We are here to present to you our post-pandemic report as requested by the board. So first slide, again, is some definitions of some acronyms that we will or may reference during the presentation tonight. You have a copy of those acronyms in front of you, and so you can refer to that in the event you start hearing acronyms come out of our mouth. All right. So what you see in front of you is an overview at a high level of expenditures related to federal pandemic relief funds for 5 fiscal years, all in totaling just shy of $216.4 million. You're probably wondering how in 5 years does a district spend $216.4 million? Well, we're about to find out. We're starting in fiscal 21. So a reminder, this was the 2020-2021 school year where we started the year with 100% virtual instruction and then slowly migrated into in-person instruction as the year progressed. We had a total of $25.1 million worth of grant funds from 8 separate funding sources, all federal. You can see from the largest one being the Coronavirus Relief Fund Technology Grant at $9.4 million, all the way down to the $51,000 in McKinney-Vento grant funds. So how this is going to work is we're going to talk through, you'll see a sort of major expenditures for each year. The ones in bold are the ones that I'm going to highlight. So I thought important to really highlight the technology ones in this year, given the fact that we did spend a good part of that year in virtual instruction. And so we used a lot of the grant funds, obviously purchasing Chromebooks, outright purchase of Chromebooks to deliver to students. And we are also able to serve over 1,000 families who did not have internet with internet access through a variety of programs, either through Comcast broadband, Verizon broadband, or Verizon MiFi devices, the mobile devices that connected cellular signals to provide internet access so that students could access all the instruction necessary as we were conducting virtual instruction. So immediately, because I really have a forward-thinking team, the minute we started receiving federal funds, the first question as they came into my office was, okay, what are we going to do to sustain this, right? How do we over time? This is one-time money. What do we do? So immediately we went into a strategy to determine what we kind of review what we've been spending and what can we possibly move over to the operating budget, things that were working or things that we wanted to sustain over time. So in fiscal 22, we already began that strategy. It was smaller. We did realize that the technology component wasn't going to go away even once we came back into in-person instruction. We had desktops for our Unit 1 and Unit 4 teams prior to COVID. And once the pandemic hit, we realized mobile devices were necessary. And so right away, we knew we were going to need to build this in as a permanent allocation. Along with our student Chromebooks. So we did ask the county government for nearly $4 million in funding for that. Unfortunately, we did not get it that fiscal year. And so we didn't, even though we asked, we did not get any sort of recurring funding for any pandemic related strategies in fiscal 22. So with that, we moved on to fiscal 22 and continued, and we had expansion of federal grants. We had 16 funding sources here in fiscal 22, $49.8 million. ESSER 3 was the biggest grant that we received. In that year, we spent about $24.5 million in ESSER 3 funding, followed closely there by ESSER 2 at $13.7 million, ESSER 1 at $4.7, all the way down to a smaller expenditure around infants and toddlers at $6,000. So you can see now, obviously, we have a larger portfolio of expenditures and programs that we spent. Again, I'm going to highlight the ones that are bolded on the screen. First is, as we began our early conversion to the science of reading, we began to start training some of our teachers in the LETRS professional development. Obviously, summer school programming was a big component here. This was for the summer of 2021. So again, we provided transportation, a variety of academic and social emotional activities for students free of charge during the summer, not only this summer, but the next 3 summers after that. Moving over to the student support side, we were able to provide or expand our school-based mental health services beyond students that typically we would serve who were Medicaid eligible. We are now able to service students who had no insurance at all, or even had private insurance where the co-pays were prohibitive for families to access that cover those services. And so this was a really great program and opportunity for students to get additional support here. We had our first year of retention bonuses. Every employee received a $1,000 retention bonus during this time as well. And so I think overall, money well spent, and we are able to service both students and help with retention of highly effective staff and faculty. So again, we're continuing our operating budget strategy of trying to migrate some of the pandemic-related grant expenditures over to the general fund. We had a much more robust request in fiscal 23. We had 7 different items ranging from science of reading investments to facilities and maintenance investments, again, instructional technology, our laptops, our virtual academy, and in visual arts. And again, in fiscal 23, nothing was funded other than our temporary teaching assistants and our extended day subs at $2.2 million. And again, I think it's important to note that while these requests were made, because they were not funded in the operating budget, that doesn't mean they all went away. We still had pandemic related dollars that we had to spend. And so we were continuing to fund many of these initiatives with the pandemic related funding, but wanted to, again, communicate both to our funders, elected officials, the community, that we valued a lot of these things that we were doing and wanted to sustain them once the grant funds expired. So heading into fiscal 23, we increased our grant spending to $64.9 million for a total of 14 different funding sources during that time. ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 were the big ticket items at $32.2 and $25.5 million respectively. We had smaller grants around advanced placement, year 2 reopening grant as well. So again, you're seeing a plethora of activities going on in fiscal 23. I will highlight again a few. The virtual school. So this was year 2 of the virtual school for us. And again, we've highlighted that on many occasions. It's the only standalone school that's virtual in the state of Maryland. And so we, obviously it was a really important time to stand that up and to continue it. We continue to offer behavioral health services, especially around substance abuse prevention, as well as our early childhood behavioral health programs. We're able to expand many of those using our mental health grants that we received during this. And then I'm going to really highlight staff support and retention. I don't have the retention bonus highlight, but just to remind the board, the superintendent and this board authorized 2 $1,000 bonuses during that fiscal year, so $2,000 bonuses. We also, this is the first year of our Maryland Leads grant, and with that, we were able to start up a new elementary alternative certification program with our community college. So we had a manager and a specialist then helping those hard to staff elementary positions. We also included an additional special education retention bonus of $500 for all Unit 1, Unit 4, and TSAs as well. And we're able to do that for 2 years. And then finally, we were able to start up with our higher education partners, tuition reimbursement for various grow your own initiatives, specifically the TA to teacher program, which has proven to be successful for us. Oh, our 2024 fiscal 24 operating budget strategy, again, looking to migrate many of these grant programs over to the general fund. We had 5 requests, and we were really successful in moving many of these over. Obviously, the big one was moving the virtual academy over to the general fund that now is a permanent school within AACPS. We were able to migrate some technology laptop funding over to the general fund, as well as a few positions through net zero reallocations, both in the CTE program as well as the McKinney-Vento program. So how do we do in fiscal 24 from a federal grant spending standpoint? We're now starting to see it slowly wind down. We only have 10 funding sources that we were managing in fiscal 24, but again, a significant amount of money, nearly $53 million in spending. The vast majority of that is coming from ESSER 3, but you can see the remainder there in the slide. And what did we spend this funding on? Again, a wide portfolio of activities, but a few that we will highlight. We did have paid apprenticeships for students. They worked in our summer programs, which was a great opportunity for them, both giving us a chance to provide additional services to students in those programs, but getting these students opportunities to earn money in the summer and learn valuable skills. The extended day subs, the ability to give schools a variety of options to fill absences in their buildings was a nice service that schools were able to access due to this funding. I think another great thing we were able to do is our Twilight School expansion. Traditionally, pre-pandemic, we only offered Twilight School credit recovery program in the spring semester. We were able to expand that to offer it in the fall semester as well, so fall and spring. Again, I've highlighted this before in other meetings. The HVAC program that we were able to institute with the COVID money was really beneficial, both getting new chillers into some of our schools as well as the ability to do preventative maintenance. So we saw a good reduction in the amount of time that units were down, either in the spring when it was warmer, or in the winter when it was colder. And then finally, part of our Grow Your Own, and obviously the teacher assistant, the teacher pipeline, is the requirement that teacher assistants have to student teach. And so they would have to, in theory, leave their job, the student to be a student teacher and not earn any money. And so what we were able to do is use this money to continue to pay them their TA salary while they student taught, for one, and then two, the schools were able to backfill TA positions, so the school didn't miss out on any teaching assistant services. So we found that model to be extremely successful. Our 2025 operating budget strategy, the one we just concluded here a few months ago. Again, we had 3 budget requests for class coverage, technology for laptops, and then a variety of software in the Office of Information Technology. And the vast majority of it was funded. We did see a small reduction in the software component that we will circle back, I'm sure, you'll see in December for our fiscal 26 request. And then what are we kind of closing it out? This is the last fiscal year of pandemic-related dollars. Again, the vast majority of this is ESSER 3 and tutoring and Maryland Leads. And so we're kind of winding these down. The majority, ESSER 3 and Maryland Leads, had to all be obligated by September 30th. So all that money was obligated by September 30th. The remaining have to be obligated by December 31st. And we are on target to do that as well. And so what is this all paying for? The CKLA adoption that this board approved back in the summer. Part of that money, part of the purchase of that material came out of COVID-related funding. Again, we just concluded our last summer school, where we offered free programming for our families. We have tutoring that's still ongoing, both homework help as well as a variety of vendors that come in during the school day or after school to provide tutoring services for our students. All right, next is we're going to just talk about a little bit of a shift in the demographics and the makeup of AACPS from when the pandemic first started to where we looked the last school year. I think you've seen this chart before, but just to reorient you. So the total enrollment since from school year 1920 to 23-24 was reduced by 647 students. As Dr. Bedell alluded to, though, we believe the 24-25 numbers, once certified in the middle of November, will jump back up. We believe we'll be over 85,000, but we are still waiting the final numbers on that. MOE enrollment, this is the enrollment we're funded on. We dropped 737 students over that time frame. But I think as we get into other demographic indicators, Students who were qualifying for free and reduced price meals increased 29% during that time frame. Our multilingual learners increased 28.5% in this time frame. Students who qualify for IEP services increased about 12.3% in that time frame. Those students who qualify for transportation services increased roughly 3.7%. No surprise to anyone in this room, our pre-K full day expanded substantially at 86%, 918 students. And then finally, home instruction student numbers did increase 32%. I will point out here, we were over 6,000 in the 21-22 school year. So it is starting to come back down, but we are at, as of last school year, roughly 4,500 students. So again, a 32% increase from where we were in the 19-20 school year. And so with that, Mr. President, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Catalano, who will walk you through the next portion of the presentation.
Thanks, Mr. Stansky. So before I get into the next portion of the presentation, I do want to share that the metrics that I'm going to walk us through are, with the exception of one, they're all nationally normed metrics. And there are a few reasons for that. One is that we had to pick a metric that was consistent from pre-pandemic through last school year. As many of you know, from the 2018-2019 school year through the 23-24 school year, the Maryland State Department of Education went through many changes in their statewide assessments, the requirements for students taking those assessments, and shifts in the accountability structure. Additionally, I do want to share that while we're comparing a metric that was consistent over time, what's not going to be consistent in the two numbers are the students. So we're not tracking cohorts of students. We're looking at a metric that was consistent from before the pandemic until now, but that's going to mean that we're looking at two different cohorts of students. And then finally, I will be sharing some strategies that we have been and are implementing that align to some of those metrics. So I want to start with attendance. These two measures for how we monitor student attendance has been the same. We look at our overall attendance rate, and we also look at our chronic absenteeism rate. So our attendance rate is relatively the same, a slight decrease in our percentage points for overall attendance. Our chronic absenteeism at the end of the 23-24 school year was higher than it was at the conclusion of the 2018-2019 school year. So we've been doing several things to address attendance. We obviously knew that when we were returning from the pandemic, our students and our families would need support around attendance. One thing that I do want to highlight on this slide is the Responsible Actions Attendance Program. This is where we provide support and education to our families. We provide them with strategies and opportunities to learn about how to support students who might be chronically absent or truant from school. Additionally, we didn't use a one-size-fits-all approach. We did differentiate the types of supports based on our clusters of schools. So the Attendance Works community of practice really supported our principals and our leaders in 3 clusters: Annapolis, North County, and Meade. We were able to partner with Concentric, who provided individual case management, mentors, and home visits, specifically in our Meade and North County clusters. Additionally, we have added PPW positions, which support supporting our families with attendance. So out-of-school suspension is one way that we monitor discipline data. You can see that our suspension rate for out-of-school suspension is almost identical. It was almost identical at the end of last school year as it was in the 2018-2019 school year. And so again, knowing that our students were going to need support when we returned them back to in-person learning, we implemented a lot of strategies, some of which Mr. Stansky alluded to as he was talking about where we were putting our fiscal resources that were coming in from federal funds. So I do want to highlight MTSS, which really is targeted support to students based on specific need. What this process allows us to do is provide supports to students, but then evaluate how students are responding to the supports that we are providing so that we can adjust when needed. We also updated our code of conduct during this time. I want to highlight here our school-based counseling supports. And so one of the things that's really important for our students is to not see social and emotional supports in isolation, but rather to have them in a classroom setting. And so we do have classroom lessons and small groups that our school counselors support to our students. Finally, we continue to provide educational options for our students. This is the one state assessment metric that I am going to highlight this evening. It's our kindergarten readiness assessment. This metric did remain the same from the fall of 2019 through the fall of 2023. And so just for context, so that fall of 2019, it was in the spring that we were hit with the pandemic. So we are relatively where we were, about 1 percentage point lower in the fall of 2023. As many of you know, the state did pause the kindergarten readiness assessment this fall. And so we are using other measures right now to measure kindergarten readiness. We have been implementing strategies in alignment to Maryland's blueprint. So as you know, we've expanded our full day pre-K for both pre-K 4s and pre-K 3s. We've also expanded the number of seats for our pre-K 3 and 4-year-old students who are receiving special education services. We also recently adopted and implemented new high quality instructional materials for both our pre-K 3 classrooms and our pre-K 4 classrooms. The next set of metrics that I'm going to walk through are all related to college and career readiness. So again, these are things that are looked at nationally, and then when I speak to specific assessments, they are all nationally normed assessments. And so I want to begin by looking at our distribution of grades. So you can see that in 2018, 2019, we had a slightly greater percentage of A's and B's and a lower percentage of E's than we have compared to the 2023-2024 school year. And these are letter grades in ELA and math. So I just want to highlight that's for these courses. PSAT, grade 11. Prior to the pandemic, this was an assessment that we gave. It is our consistent assessment in the SAT suite that we continue to give from the fall of 2019 through the fall of 2023. It is also the National Merit Qualifying Assessment. And so we in 2023 did see lower percentage points of students who were meeting the CCR benchmark. So for those of you who don't know, the SAT suite, beginning with the PSAT 8-9, establishes what they call college and career benchmarks. And so that's what this is referring to. So for PSAT grade 11, for example, the college and career benchmark for English, for reading and writing, is a 460. And for math, it's a 510. And so what you're seeing here is an ELA about 6 percentage points lower in ELA of students hitting that CCR benchmark. And then in math, we're looking at a decrease as well. Two other indicators of college and career readiness that I just want to talk about are IB and AP. The number of our students accessing IB and the number of IB tests taken in 2023 are less than those in 2019. And our percentage of students passing was about 6% less in 2023. With regard to AP, Dr. Bedell has previously spoken to this data point. We have had more students accessing AP courses, taking the AP assessments, and we've had higher pass rates on AP exams. And then finally, the last college and career readiness metric I'm going to speak to is our graduation rate, which is relatively the same. We're looking at about a 1 percentage point decrease in 2023 compared to 2019. So I do want to take some time to talk about the ongoing strategies that we've been implementing to address college and career readiness. I'm going to spend some time on this slide highlighting the adoption and implementation of high quality instructional materials at the elementary level. This has been one of the most important transitions that we have made in the areas of literacy and mathematics. And so, as you know, Reveal Mathematics, which is our curriculum at the elementary level, meets standards across all of the domains for high quality instructional materials as measured through EdReports. So EdReports is an independent nonprofit company that reviews and evaluates instructional materials over several different domains. And they're looking at whether or not the materials will improve student outcomes against rigorous standards that are college and career readiness standards. And then in addition to Reveal, and Mr. Stansky spoke of this, we also transitioned to using the Science of Reading framework for literacy instruction at the elementary level. And with that, we did adopt Amplify's core knowledge language arts, otherwise known as CKLA, again, rated as meeting standards across all domains when it comes to EdReports at the elementary level. Both of these sets of instructional materials are known to yield results when they're implemented with fidelity. And so I do want to just pause for a moment and say, I know that recently there have been some questions around the elementary schedule for our early release days. With AACPS having the shortest elementary day out of all LEAs in Maryland and 12 early release days, the decision was made to design a schedule that would allow our instructional staff in the school to stay on pace with these materials. We have not changed any policy. And since students are leaving school early and they will have opportunities for movement and opportunities for brain breaks throughout the morning, the schedule was designed specifically to support the implementation of these materials. I also do want to highlight a few other things on this slide, including our drop-in homework help. Mr. Stansky mentioned ongoing high dosage tutoring, and then expanding our advanced pathways in ELA in middle school. And on the next slide, you'll see we're also expanding access to accelerated math pathways in middle school. As I mentioned when I was talking about PSAT 11, the SAT suite does set CCR benchmarks for each of their assessments. It's really exciting that we are now offering to all students PSAT 8, 9, and 9th grade. That took place on October 9th. We're offering PSAT 10. We're continuing to offer PSAT 11, and then we're offering SAT. And then finally, we've provided flexible blocks in schedules. These are designed to provide acceleration and enrichment for our students. So the pandemic was a pretty catastrophic event that we found profoundly impacted our community, our students, our staff, but we were able to innovate through this process. As we adapted to the conditions of the pandemic, we did begin to really look at things that we felt were no longer serving our students well, and were able to innovate around things that we felt would better serve students, especially when it comes to academic outcomes. And so I do want to share some of those. Many of them have to do with our processes and our infrastructure and our management as a school system. So we were able to streamline how we onboard new teachers and new employees into our system. We increased our infrastructure and our management. One of the things I think came out of this that was very beneficial is prior to the pandemic, we never had a plan for virtual learning in the event of an inclement weather day. So if you remember, we had a large snowstorm. We had to look at our calendar and see where we could adjust, to where we could add days. And now we have a plan for virtual learning days in the event that we need them. Additionally, we really looked at how we were organized as a staff, specifically at the leadership level in AACPS. We were able to see where we could improve efficiencies around the way we did our work, all in service to our schools. The pandemic allowed us to look at professional learning in a different way. We now know that we don't have to bring everyone together in one place to be able to offer high quality professional learning. We use both a hybrid of virtual and in-person opportunities for our staff. We also have professional learning that we call as on demand, meaning we have modules that staff can access anywhere, anytime if they're needed. And as we've mentioned, out of the pandemic, we did become the only county in the state that has a virtual school with a school code. In addition to us implementing, as we've spoken about several times, our new alternative vehicle program, which was an innovative way that we address the staffing shortages for bus drivers coming out of the pandemic, we've also done a better job harnessing communication with our families. Specifically, I want to highlight how we now have great technology as it pertains to being able to communicate with our families in their first language, meeting the needs of our families, of our multilingual learners. And as you saw on the enrollment slide, that is an increased population in our school system since the 2018-2019 school year. And so that concludes our presentation. And at this time, we'll take any questions or comments.
Thank you. We're going to go by roll call order. First, we have Ms. Frank.
Yes, thank you. I have a lot of notes, so give me just a second. There's a lot that I want to discuss tonight. So the first thing that I noticed was a lot of these have data from the 1920 school year or the 18-19 school year, and then not again until the 2023 school year. Was there a reason that we didn't have the intervening years as well?
We were comparing where we started to where we were at the end of last year.
But was there a particular reason why you didn't include all of those years?
No, we just wanted 2 points in time.
Okay, I think it would definitely be helpful to see, especially you mentioned the AP started to overtake the 19 school year. It would be really helpful to see, like, at what point that happened, and to see, you know, some of these data points. Did they maintain through COVID, or did they go down, or did they go up in some cases? I know, for instance, the virtual academy was, you know, a really hot commodity at one point, and then now we sort of see things, attendance drooping a little bit. So all of these sort of measures and countermeasures that occurred during COVID, it would be helpful to see if those were static during that time or if they fluctuated. So the first thing I would do is kind of request to fill that out a little bit more. And then I can't recall, were there years where students did not take the PSAT, or were they able to take that every?
They were able to take PSAT 11, which is why we
Yeah,
included
the
it.
11. Yeah. Okay. So they were able to do that. Okay.
Yes, it's
Yes.
a fall assessment.
That one I definitely would want to see, because I want to see, was it, you know, a dip and then we haven't just caught back up, or was it a slow decline? So I think that would be helpful.
Let me speak to that one, because I think that is no different than the state making the decision that MCAPs really don't have any bearing anymore for high school students. So what happened with the pandemic was a number of universities made a decision that they weren't going to utilize SAT or ACT. So you see these dips, and I know some universities now are starting to come back to say, hey, we are going to be utilizing ACT and SAT. But I can tell you, based on my observations of the SAT, pre-SAT scores, that most certainly played a role in why I think kids were like, it's really not, it doesn't matter. It's not going to impact me going to college. I think even during my previous time in my previous district, I was trying to explain to students that while it may not matter to you, it matters from a scholarship standpoint. There's a lot of scholarship money available based on how well you do on the SAT. So I just want to make sure I put that out there as we're looking at that particular data point.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think the PSAT data is really valuable. I think seeing where that went and how it tracks is really needed as we address things like our PSAT scores, especially if we're moving away from MCAP. Why, what can we do to improve these metrics? So I would definitely want to see those. So I guess the just 20,000 foot view, and then I'm sure we'll go back around and I'll dig into a couple things a little bit more. One thing I want to see is the biggest needs that were evident immediately post-COVID, what has been addressed, and what we still need to focus on. So if you could just, roll through one or two things that you were like, hey, this is what we saw immediately. These are the one or two things. And I can think, transportation is probably top of mind for a lot of folks. Was there anything else that you can say, hey, we did a really great job on this, but we're still struggling on that?
I mean, I can take it from the academic standpoint. I would say coming out, the greatest need was acceleration for student learning. And so I do think we were able to attack that from a multi-prong approach. And that's where you see investments into things like high dosage tutoring and homework help and adoption of new curriculum and flex blocks to be able to accelerate student learning. Had we not done that, I don't think our students would have gained the ground that they did as quickly as they did coming out of the pandemic. So academically, I would say that's the need that we saw, and it was our approach to address that in as many ways as we possibly could.
And I'll say from my perspective, the number one concern I have is just sustainability. I think the pandemic sort of exposed, right, things that the district, wasn't doing prior, and now is essentially forced to take on. And I think with the shift in demographics, our students are coming with more needs than they did previously. And I think the revenue that's coming in to operate the district is not enough at the moment to sustain what it is we need to do. I think of something like transportation, where through our innovative practices, we've been able to at least now, reduce the vacancy number to 0, but we still are struggling with a bench. We'll talk probably more about this Wednesday, but we've seen a double-digit increase in spending in transportation in the last 2 years, just to try to maintain that. That's not sustainable in the out years. And so I think one thing I'm looking to try and kind of tackle is both communicating that with funders that the landscape has changed for school districts dramatically. And, offering these basic services that we traditionally have offered is costing more money. And, we got to be able to communicate that so that there's an understanding of what is required so that we can get the funding necessary to do that.
Yeah, and Chromebooks is another one that kind of comes to mind too when we talk about sustainability. And I know that when we got the Chromebooks, I remember there was a huge push and everybody was looking for devices. And I always wonder, if we had had time to source things, would we have ended up with Chromebooks? And now that we have them, would we switch to something different if we could? And so we've sort of invested into this product. Yeah, so
Asking all those
we are actually asking the exact same questions internally.
So COVID was the impetus, but clearly we are sort of in this situation now. And to your point, and I agree with you, how do we sort of A, break away from that, and B, move into something else that's needed, and can we?
Right, and so we talked about on the employee side, we use that the leasing model, which is a permanent sustaining model to replenish those devices. As we stated, we bought over 100,000 Chromebooks with cash, right, with no sustainable method to replace them in the out years. We're fortunate that that Google has extended the life of the support life of these devices, but we're going to have to come and make some really difficult decisions moving forward, and probably make some recommendations to this board that will be of significant investment.
Well, I've definitely gone on record with my comments to that, so I'll leave it for then. I will go ahead and let you guys move on, and then I definitely have some other questions. Thanks.
Okay, Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. So thank you for all of this. Is there a way, or will we at some time see data that show where we are relative to other districts? I mean, in other words, all of these are trends that every district was dealing with, right? So it's important to know how we've done, but it's also important, I would think, to know how we've done relative to other districts, and then figure out, what we did that worked and what we did that didn't work. So I would just put a request in at some point for an opportunity to see that, because I think that will give us also some context that could be helpful. The demographic changes in some cases are really startling. I mean, the farms increase, the special ed increase. Is there any information, or will there be any information to your knowledge that can in any way project for us how these trends continue? Is this a spike that came out of COVID that may level off or even drop, or is this just the future? In which case that has a lot to do with sustainability as well. Is there any?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think, when we get the certified enrollment in November, that will be another year, another data point. I would say early indications would tell me that we're going to see increases again in those areas. I think statewide, when you look at it statewide, I mean, I would say I was reviewing this data last January, and the state of Maryland, for all the wealth that we have, over 50% of public school students in Maryland qualify for free and reduced price meals
Yep.
now. If you would have told me that 10 years ago, I would have said there's no way.
Mhm.
And so I don't think it's just happening in Anne Arundel County. I think it's happening around the state. And so, but I think part of sort of projecting in the out years what kind of funding we'll receive from Blueprint, the types of needs we'll have, we're going to no longer just be required to project our standard pre-K through 12 enrollment. We're going to need to start projecting, where do we see IEPs going in 5 years? Where do we see our free and reduced price meal percentages going? Where is our multilingual learner percentage? And, and what are the trends around that? We're going to have to start projecting all of that
Right.
in order to, one, inform us as to what kind of revenue we think we're going to see. And I think, two, to help, our strategic plan's a 5-year plan. I think that will help inform, the interventions and the programs necessary to make sure all those students are successful here in Anne Arundel County.
I mean, on the face of it, one of the arguments for pre-K is that you have the opportunity to catch things early, which would suggest, and I think I've seen some data about this in other areas, that you are likely to have somewhat fewer IEPs later on, right? You're certainly likely to have less remedial work. I mean, that assumes you're following a child that goes all the way through. Obviously, we know children come in and out at different times. So that will also be interesting to see if we see that as we move forward. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I think early intervening services are important. Getting kids reading on grade level by the end of grade 2 is also really important to that. I think I would just add, though, that there's nuances to some of these changing demographics.
Mhm.
So, for example, with regard to our multilingual learner population, not all of that increases with our youngest learners.
Right.
So we're enrolling students at the middle grades, we're enrolling students at high school who are newcomers to the United States,
Yeah.
learning English for the first time. So some of it is sustainability and some of it is brand new for us
Right.
with those demographic shifts.
Yep.
And I've had colleagues last week at MAVE ask me, with some of the shifts that they're seeing in some of their school districts, are we seeing similar shifts? One I know in particular will be speaking at the state board meeting about some of these changes. And one of them is just what I've shared with the board previously about students not necessarily being potty trained.
Yep.
It's not just an Anne Arundel County thing. This is other districts this is happening in. And so I think there's a number of concerns around just overall the cost to do the things that we have to do as educational institutions that some of these changes are bringing in. And you're right. The question is it a byproduct of what happened during those years with COVID? Or were we already seeing some regression with some things that we would think, 6-year-olds should be
They
potty
should
trained?
be
Yeah.
settled. Attendance. I know there, I know because obviously the Annapolis cluster is in my district that there have been very concentrated efforts. Obviously, Annapolis Elementary, for example, made huge leaps in this. Can you say anything about measures or data that tell you that what we're doing is in fact the most effective, or are there other things we should be thinking about?
Yes. So what's under those strategies that I shared are often what we would call the progress monitoring metrics that tell us if they're working. And so if we are implementing a specific strategy in a cluster, in an individual school, or with a specific family, we're coming back in attendance committees to review what the response to that intervention is so that we can make adjustments based on that. So it's what's underneath the strategies that I shared, is that school-based team constantly coming back and looking at what they've done and whether or not they're actually seeing things move in the right directions with students coming to school.
And then let me just speak to that too, because this year, every Friday, I give the school board the superintendent's weekly update. And in there, we will give you the attendance rates. I think we give you attendance rates.
Yep.
We generally give you week to week. We compare 1 week from last year to this year. But what I can tell you is if we were to do an average of our first 5 weeks of school, the numbers are off the charts, I think, compared to last year at this time. And I think there's several things in addition to what Ms. Catalano has said, is we've been able to really address transportation better, even though I think some of the growth we have has created a little bit of stress on the system. But because we're able to bring kids to school, that's a major focus of ours. I think this focus around culture and climate in our schools is also making a difference, because generally you're not going to see high schools at 96%. Almost anywhere, unless you are a small private school or a very tiny school district. But for us to have seen several weeks of our high school attendance rates at 96% and middle school hovering around that same area or 95% says that the culture and climate things that we wanted to focus on, creating a sense of belonging, those things are paying dividends early on. So I think it's a combination of those components, but also just our ability to be able to get kids to school that we couldn't do over the past couple of years consistently.
One quick last question, and then I'll let us move on. So I'm curious about the IB/AP thing, because obviously we got fewer kids going into IB.
Correct.
And clearly those that are going into IB are not performing at the same level, and yet AP is up and the numbers are looking pretty good. Now, for the record, Dr. Bedell knows this. I've said this. I have a prejudice, so everyone's clear, and it comes from being a college professor. I'll just be honest with you. I think IB is better college preparation than many. I know people will come down on me like a ton of bricks, but I'm just saying. And so I'm curious about this, and if you have any thoughts.
I don't know that I have an answer as to the why. I do think one of the things you have to take into consideration is that IB is only accessible in 3 of our high schools.
Right.
And so you're looking at a much smaller end size when
Mhm.
you're thinking
Right.
about those numbers from a percentage standpoint. We have fewer students just because of the way it's organized as a magnet program, accessing or having the option to access IB courses and
Mhm.
assessments. And so I do think that's one of the factors when
Mhm.
you're looking at all of our high schools, which all have access to AP.
Right.
It's a different end size.
Right.
I think that we've had a lot of conversations around what are those greatest indicators of college success. Um, it was difficult during the years when colleges did go test optional. Traditionally, SAT benchmarks were a good indicator. Not that that was college preparation,
Right.
but it was a good indicator of college readiness. I think coming back to that, that's going to assist us. We didn't share this particular data, but there's the whole other data point of dual enrollment as well.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so you have the threshold that the SAT gives us, but then you also have the exposure through IB, AP, and dual enrollment. I think that what we need to look at is how are we ensuring students have a complement of things that they can access that will help them understand what the rigor of a college level course actually feels like and looks like.
I mean, just to say, one of the things I have found is both dual enrollment and IB have a huge advantage in teaching, in helping students cultivate the ability to work independently on extended work and their writing,
Mhm.
both of which are extremely important as job skills, quite frankly. They go far beyond college. It's really about, so I'll just put that plug in. Okay, well, I will let us move on, and
Thanks.
I may have a couple more questions. Thank you.
Ms. Schauheim.
Yes, thank you for all of this. This is lovely. I want to go back to the dual enrollment question because I would definitely love to see that data if you have it. And obviously it does not have to be during this setting, but if you can get it to us, that would be great. I also want to remind the board that we did see a bunch of data in green and red highlights that show, I believe it's the last, what years do those cover? Here. Oh.
The last 3.
So yeah, so while the point of this exercise tonight is to look at 18-19 versus 23-24. Can I read from this? You good? Okay. We do have some of the out years. So the 21-22, 22-23, 23-24. So 3 years. All of these in the middle between 18-19 and 23-24, where KRA went up. MCAP, although it's a state assessment, that's a whole nother talk show, went up in both reading and math. And this is over multiple years. Out of school suspensions dropped. Attendance went up. Chronic absenteeism dropped. And that's elementary. MCAP across the board went up, elementary, middle, and high. Out of school suspensions for all 3 levels went down. IB scores went up. So now compared to from the 22-23 year to the 23-24 year, it did go up. We're back almost at 53%. And then we've already talked about AP. And then the chronic absentee rate has gone down. So this is a lot of the intervening years. And I have this at home and I look at it a lot. Because I think even though, because I don't want someone to pop onto this on YouTube and be like, oh my God, hair on fire, look at how we've dropped off. Yes, shades of gray, but not really when you look at when you take sort of the middle of the storm to the end of last year.
Yes.
So there's that. I understand. I'm gonna go there. Sorry, I'm definitely gonna go there. So while all of this is important, so is the experience that our kids receive, and it's not there. It's like a water glass. You can fill it up, and at some point it spills over. There's a point of diminishing return. So I'm going to go to that early dismissal days. I'm getting a lot of emails now. The floodgates have started to open. We fought for recess. It's like one of the few things we agree on is recess. So, and we had a policy implemented as a result of those conversations, and we wanted consistency across every school, not Folger Mackenzie gets X, another elementary school gets Y. No, it had consistency. And so I do think, and I do feel that there is a point of diminishing returns even on early dismissal days, and the assumption that every kid can then play outside after school on early dismissal days is sort of an incorrect place to go, because we know that not every kid has that opportunity. And we know that because there's a variety of environments that our kids return home to. So I just want to, I've expressed and voiced my concerns, which is the right thing for a board member to do at this point. Don't have my gloves on yet. I do want to see how this plays out, and but we do have to take into account the perspective of parents who so far I've yet to receive an email saying, oh my God, I'm so glad you got rid of recess on an early dismissal day. Gosh, that was such a problem. I think that when you're allowed to unwind in an unstructured way, not a go noodle, although my daughter did love those as an elementary school child, for real. But not just a brain break, but unstructured time, or else we might find that pounding it all in on early dismissal days is the juice is not worth the squeeze, to use a term my former colleague used often. So I just wanted to say that. And those are basically, I mean, Dr. Tillman hit on a lot of things that I was going to ask. Oh yes, so I love the projections, like how can we project what the next what the future looks like in terms of the demographics. And I just wish that our funding would be more forward thinking too, because it's really hard on this school system, and I would argue every LEA in Maryland, to have a maintenance of effort that reflects historical numbers. So what good does that do us when our enrollment goes up? What is it? Probably 1,500 kids, though we don't know that yet. And I'm just throwing a number out there. I would hazard a guess that it's probably between 750 kids and 1,500 kids is an increase. But yet we don't have the money to properly support them, because the maintenance of effort is historically looking. So there might be some opportunities for us to then, as we innovate, try to get our Maryland General Assembly to do the same. Because, and I there's I have a lot of friends in there, and a lot of the work they do is really, really great. This is not one of those things. So because with Blueprint, and we've seen what Blueprint has done so far, and we can argue this till I'm blue in the face, though I'd prefer not. I still believe that Blueprint was designed with a fully funded school system in mind, and that was never AACPS. That might have looked, if you took just the last several years and as a snapshot, you might think it is, but no, we've never really been able to handle the class size reduction. We've never really been able to be fully staffed, because until recently we weren't paying them what they ought to be paid, and we still have a lot of work to do in all those arenas. And so I would still argue that Blueprint was envisioned a fully funded school system from jump. And so when you have maintenance of effort looking backwards, and then Blueprint, of course you're going to have to take from one school and give to another to create equity. But I would argue that it's just the wrong way around with all those things. So I know this is not a soliloquy, and I'm talking way too much, but I just wanted to put all that out there and on the table, because I just think it's important as we go forward and try to grapple with whatever Blueprint is going to throw at us. I think we're doing a hell of a job. I really do. I think the all sorts of things we're doing right, but it just gets on. We're getting in our own way because of all of these various pieces that, and because of how the school system started.
Can I see that?
Yeah, of course.
Because I want to respond.
Yeah, please.
All right. Thank you. Yes, thank you for bringing up the concern around the early release days. I know you and I have had an opportunity to talk about it, and I totally understand some of the frustration. I think I've received about 7 emails from families that are kind of, what are you guys doing? So I want to just kind of give some context on this. And I think this is the part that I'm certain I'll get some pushback on this. But, you know, as a superintendent, there are times when I have to take immediate action when I believe that we're putting ourselves in a situation where it will be detrimental to us being able to execute on properly educating our students. And so with the 6 early release days, we have 12. I've never worked in a district with 12 early release days, and I've been in the business since 1999. That wasn't created by Mark Bedell and many of the administrators that's on our cabinet, but that's what we walked into. I was also told when I came here by a board that voted for me unanimously that we have to transition and put better curriculum in this school district. It is unacceptable that we are one of 2 school districts that has not transitioned to the science of reading. So we were able to do that. We were able to bring in high quality materials. But even in bringing in those high quality materials, I shared with this school board that my biggest concern at this point is that we don't have enough instructional minutes in the elementary school day, beyond the control of a superintendent that's been here 2 years and 2 months. But it's also because we have negotiated agreements that are already done in a certain way, and just in general, the way that our system is set up, where we don't have a minutes-based or hours-based system, we have a 180-day requirement, something that I've been fighting for since I got here. So I get emails with people saying, you know, just eliminate these early release days. It's ridiculous that we have all these early release days. I've been trying. I need people to come in and help
Facts.
fight so that we can get rid of them, and we can now do the professional development in the manner that we need to do it. But with that being said, we have a total of potentially 6 hours that's going to be impacted around recess time. Even with us saying that we want to make sure that our kids have brain breaks and they have opportunities to move around, that 30-minute, so we're looking at 0.5% of the actual school year where our kids will look at an alternative to the 30-minute recess, so we can get through this scripted curriculum and make sure that by the time we get to the end of this school year, we're seeing better progress with our literacy performance. I get beat up. Yes, Dr. Bedell, it's like you guys are celebrating mediocrity, right? But when I look at our MCAP scores, I can't push back on people feeling that way when only 52% of our kids at the elementary level are able to pass this test. We have a curriculum now, but if we don't implement the curriculum with fidelity, I'm still going to get beat up. If I say I'm trying to implement the curriculum and something has to give, I'm getting beat up. And ultimately for me, I know people are like, well, why didn't we know about this? Because we just ran into this problem. This is our first release day with a brand new curriculum. And we said, and when the team came to me and said, Dr. Bedell, we have to do this because we owe this to our kids. I said, okay, sure. That it was a tough decision. I did not give this board advance notification. You're absolutely right. And I was put in a situation where I didn't have time to do that. A learned aspect of what needs to happen in the future as we bring new curriculum in, but it's not to take away anybody's recess. We're not changing the policy. We're asking for some support And we're going to look at doing some things a little bit different just on these 12 release days so we can make sure that we can get through this curriculum and that our kids, we can bring in better scores than what we're bringing in right now and have more kids ready to be able to thrive. That was the only reason, y'all. We're not doing anything arbitrary. We're not being secretive. We're not, and we've even called several of the parents that have brought up concerns to try to explain to them. And some of them you can't reason with, right? But ultimately, like the parents that we have spoken to, a number of them said, hey, we thank you, we understand, and we're gonna work through this. And like you said, let's see how this works out. And I'm always open to coming back to the table to say, okay, how did that work? And if it didn't, what do we need to do differently? But I just want to put that out there. We're not doing arbitrary things. Just we're looking at data and we're trying to make the right decisions.
And so in response to that, I would say thank you. And maybe maybe communicating that en masse would be appropriate in advance. It is tomorrow. It's a little late, but communicating that in so that you head off the forum email, which is starting to happen. And I did write back to a parent or two and say, I get it. A forum email is not effective, but please continue to share your thoughts, your particular thoughts, and your words. So and I understand that. And so to tie that in with this morning, y'all, we got to get rid of the 12 early dismissal days. And the only way to do that is to decouple the hours and the days. So let's do that, please. Finally, thank you, this session. So that next calendar, even though we'll have to, in the meantime, pass a calendar for next year, then we can say, hooray, y'all, look, there's an updated calendar that we just passed, and it doesn't have all this stuff. And so therefore, your recess concern is a non-issue. So anyway, I just wanted to finish where I started and say that I am grateful for all this information. I'm grateful for all that data. I think we're on the right track. When people look at this, don't just look at the beginning and the end point. So we got to message the sheet too in a communication.
Yeah, we're gonna do it. Well, I know we will be doing a deep data dive, but
Cool.
I'll talk to Mr. Dykstra. Maybe all of this is ready to be released.
Yeah, hopefully. And I didn't read the numbers, but yeah, I mean, those are the buckets that they fall under. So thank you for all of this. And I'm also grateful eternally for our forward thinking in terms of what we need to get into a sustainably into our operating budget, without which homework help wouldn't be a thing. And, I pulled it up on my kid's computer and said, look, I don't do algebra. I didn't do it well then. Click the link. It's right here. Ask another adult. Yeah.
They're there.
Cool. Yes. Thank you so much for both of you. I really appreciate it. And your teams. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess it's now my turn. Again, I want to thank both of you for this great report and all the staff and Dr. Bedell. So I have some comments probably from the standpoint of a teacher for 49 years, and I may have a couple questions, but the pandemic did expose a lot of weaknesses. But guess what? As a school system, with all of our great teachers and students, we did pivot on a dime. If somebody had asked me back in 2019 or 20, when do you think every student will have a Chromebook? I would have said probably never. And guess what? As a result of the pandemic, that happened. And now we have some issues, and I have every confidence that we're going to be dealing with that in the appropriate manner. So a couple things. The attendance rates, we're doing an awful lot to improve that. I'm not so terribly concerned now. I was a little bit back in the spring when I saw attendance rates at 87. But then this year, they're 94, 94.6. And I mean, can we get better? We can. A lot of things are happening to do that. We used to do some things such as attendance review committees, and I think we need to get back to that, and I think we are, because that made a difference. We actually had some standards, and in some cases, I think we may have fallen behind a little bit, not holding students accountable for what our expectations were. But I'm not so concerned about that. I was concerned about the IB numbers. I understand it's only in 3 schools, and so y'all talked about that, and I understand that. The AP numbers, they've gone up, but more importantly, not only have the numbers gone up, the scores have gone up. I would like to see that trend continue. Every student that chooses and has the ability, well, every student that wants to take AP courses should be afforded that opportunity. The Virtual Academy, only county in the state of Maryland that has a permanent virtual school with a school code. And so we've been able to use some of our funding, federal funding, and now it's on our dime, and Dr. Bedell done a great job of that. So, hey, it's here. Does it need some, take a look at it to see where it is now? Where do we need to go with it? I think the answer to that is yes, because I think what can happen with that could really help address for instance, some of our at-risk students. When I looked at the enrollment figures and I see that they're projected that they're going down, I hope the public out there doesn't believe that, because I sat on one of the committees with the county, and we dealt with enrollments, and over the next 10 years, our enrollments are going to really go up dramatically. And so I know we had a 29% increase in farms. That doesn't startle me, because maybe what we're doing is a lot of our families are now actually accessing that, because it used to be, for instance, in the North County area, students at the elementary school were farms, but somehow or another, magically, they came to us in the high school and they were no longer farm students. Well, there were reasons for that. So, but in any event, I am concerned about the behavioral health services. You know, the National School Board tells us that the mental health is the biggest issue that still confronts us, our students and our staff. And so I think we've done a great job of providing behavioral health services. We need to continue to make sure we do that. When it comes to the PSAT offerings and SAT offerings, that is all great. We do have to make sure, however, that our students understand the value of taking the test, because I'm going to tell you, my experience is large numbers, and particularly if you're giving it to 9th graders, large numbers of students will just blow it off. And so there's no validity there. But I think it's important for us to make sure that we educate our kids about the value of that. So there were maybe 2 other things for me. One is we haven't talked a whole lot about middle schools. And I think in terms of our student outcomes at the high school level, what happens in middle school is really does impact that. And so I also know that Dr. Bedell and staff, you are taking a look at that. And I know that there will be some innovative things coming down the pike. So I'm just putting that out there. And then one final thing is we talk about scores, MCAP. And again, as a teacher, someone that gave many of those tests, I did my very best, as I think all of our teachers do, to impact students, to let them know that they need to focus and do their very best. But the real world, folks, is that far too many do not. Many of our students, far too many students simply do not. And so what I am more concerned and interested in is the letter grades that our students are earning every quarter. I think if we were to take a look at that data, I think that's going to tell us maybe some more stories. And so it would be much more valid than taking a look at the MCAP. So having said that, again, thank you so much for your presentation. It's really been great and helpful. Now, we're going to go around one more round. I can't worry about a football game. We're going to go around one more round. So we'll see where it goes. Miss Frank.
Yes, thank you. So I'm glad you brought up behavioral health. Do we have anything? So I know that we put a lot of ESSER funding into behavioral health year over year over year. Do we have anything that states how our students are doing as far as drug addiction or as far as, I know we used to track overdoses in the county frequently. A lot of that has gone off the radar. Do we have anything to suggest how we're doing comparatively 19, 20 intervening years and to now?
Off the top of my head, the only metric I could think of that would be consistent that could potentially give us some of that information is the Youth at Risk survey. I'm looking at and we give it every 2 years. It is self-reporting on behalf of students, but that survey does ask questions that would get at the kinds of data you're asking for, and we give that every 2 years.
But but self-reporting. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. And then so absenteeism. One question I have as I'm thinking about all of this, and we're at pretty high rates of presentism right now. So do we have any data from like 20 years ago to say what was normal, prior to this current cohort of students?
I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to.
Yeah, what
From
was
20
normal? What
years
was
ago?
normal when I was growing up,
I might be able to give
Yeah,
some
how
anecdotal.
are we doing? Yes, that would be helpful.
Oh, 20 years ago, you were growing up,
Okay, 50 years.
and I've been teaching for how many years? So 20 years ago, there were many years when in Anne Arundel County at challenge schools. In the challenge school, teachers would earn a bonus. And one of the factors that impacted that was the attendance rate. And in order to earn, it was called AYP, Adequate Yearly Progress. In order to earn that, you had to have an attendance rate of 94%. 94. Now, I'm going to tell you, almost every year, we did get the AYP. Maybe there was a year or two where we did not. And so when I looked at the back in the spring and I saw some attendance of 87, I'm thinking, whoa, 20 years ago we were at 94 or better for most of the year. So, I mean, so teachers were definitely motivated. Assistant principal, well, the admin was motivated also. So
94% is a good static baseline of what we should be achieving. Generally, I mean, even over time, it's a good indicator. Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. Thank you. I appreciate that story. I am definitely going to comment on the recess as well. I've certainly got my share of not just emails, but folks wanting to know why I didn't know about this sooner. So I was very disappointed to see that. When we talk about recess, we are talking about like food, something that is essential to the growth of a child. And we're not talking about half days. We're talking about a day that is comprised of less time by 2 hours. So they're still sitting in a chair for approximately 6-something hours. As a mother of a child with ADHD, to expect an elementary school child like mine to sit in an environment without an unstructured play, I think would be frankly abusive to that child. A brain break is not unstructured play, And when you look at studies, depending on the study and the age of the child, that time is 1 to 3 hours in a day. And when these kids get out of daycare or they get out of SAC in the wintertime, it is dark. So we are not allowing those children to thrive. So to say that we need a couple of extra minutes for a curriculum, yeah, that's important, but it's not essential.
Curriculum's not essential?
Not to life, no.
I disagree with that. I think curriculum is very essential. The kids can't read. We've set these kids up for a life that's not going to be prosperous.
Every single day, a student needs to eat. A student needs to sleep. Every single day, they do not need 10 minutes extra curriculum or 25 minutes extra curriculum, but they do need the building blocks of life, which are sleeping, eating, and playing. So I would strongly disagree with that. I agree with Ms. Schalheim. You know, this recess was an extreme priority for this board. And we fought very hard to get more recess, not less. And I am very, very disappointed that that this is not something that we tonight are acknowledging as how crucial it really is. Thank you.
Dr. Tobin.
So I have a couple of other questions, but let me just add to this. I think what we're looking at is a really unfortunate situation where we are asking our superintendent and his staff to make an impossible choice, quite frankly. There are plenty of people out there right now screaming that our scores are unacceptable, that we have a quote unquote failing system, et cetera, et cetera. And Dr. Bedell is doing exactly, first of all, I don't buy that we have a failing system, but let me just be clear about that. But Dr. Bedell is doing exactly what this board has asked him to do, which is to focus on academics and make the hard choice to actually meet the requirements of the curriculum that all the appropriate assessments tell us will in fact deliver those skills that many demand, quite frankly. Now, I absolutely am in agreement with the need for recess. And we go back to the point of the fact that these early release days are frankly ridiculous. They don't actually give us good instruction usually, and they don't give us good PD opportunities. They're a failure on both counts. And therefore, we have to get this calendar thing worked out. We have to change the language from and to or, because that is the root of this problem. The other root of this problem is that this system has functioned on remarkably little money for a very long time, and the short duty day is a result of that. And we have to be honest about that. I have said on this board many times, there is a real cost to education, good academics, and good academics demand attention to the whole child, to your point, Ms. Frank. But then we got to get real about what that means. We don't get to have it both ways. So, first issue is to get rid of the early release days. And the second issue is, if those who are upset about recess are willing to take less than what is necessary in the advance of scores, they need to be honest about that, because it's going to be one or the other. The professionals have told us that, and we either trust them or we don't. And so this is a time where, all choices have consequences. And I believe Dr. Bedell is doing his best given the two nasty choices he has, quite frankly. Neither one of them is a great option. But at this moment, given the concerns around where scores are, where reading is, where math is, then we have to be honest about that. I will say, having been in schools quite a bit, as we all have, that school is not anymore any amount of hours of just sitting in a chair. It simply isn't. It certainly isn't at the elementary level. It's not what it was when we were kids. And so I do think we have to be careful about projecting what the school day was when we were kids onto what is going on right now. And anybody who's spent any time in our classes extensively sees that. But that being said, recess is important. We know it's important. And so I would hope the public, especially the public who is concerned about this, will be in front of the state legislature testifying come session on our behalf to get this law changed, because that's what's going to fix it. Now, a couple of other things. Tutoring. I think we've known for decades that this is as close to a magic bullet as you can find, right? Am I wrong?
It's good.
It's good. So as everyone knows, I've spent years evaluating public charter networks around the country. The high performing ones all have a lot of tutoring. That is how you move kids 2 years in a year. That is how you keep everyone moving forward. So I would hope our funders, come budget season, understand that if we are going to see real results for our students, this tutoring cannot go away.
I agree. It's how we will support sustaining acceleration
Exactly.
over time. And so I know that my team is looking very closely, though, at where we've been with tutoring, knowing that our fiscal reality is what it is coming into this budget season, being really strategic around where we've seen
Mhm.
gains, where maybe we haven't seen the gains that we were hoping for. We've had a variety of partners, we've had a variety of models. And so really our job right now is to determine what are the things that we know we need to continue to advocate for, because there are things that will allow us to sustain acceleration.
And it's my understanding that tutoring is one of the great sources of equity, because it simply isn't the same in every household, parents' ability or availability to support their student.
Mhm.
And so it's having access for all students to high quality tutoring. And again, you have to measure what constitutes high quality and what doesn't. That is for the professionals to determine. But high quality tutoring that is available to every student, I believe in every other measure I've seen, can make a significant difference. And again, there's an ROI factor here, right? Because if you're putting that forward, you are not talking about the kind of remediation later on, which is less effective, or heaven forbid, the school to prison pipeline. The fact that overwhelmingly people who are incarcerated can't read. So all the things that we know are burdens not just on the school system, but ultimately on society, start with this. So, these things are all interrelated, and putting the money in where it is most effective, I would hope my most fiscally concerned colleagues and other elected officials and funders would pay attention to, because it's not just money you spend, it's money you spend well. And finally, So quick thing, home teaching went up a whole lot. You mean health and home and hospital
this is-
teaching?
No,
Homes-
homeschooling.
Homeschooling. Okay,
Yes.
that makes more sense. Okay, I
But
wonder.
comparing those 2 points, because I believe you quoted over 6,000.
A few, the 21-22 school year was over 6,000.
Okay,
So,
gotcha.
yeah.
That makes more
Coming
sense
back
to me.
down?
Yeah,
Yeah.
my understanding is it's starting to come down, but
Mm-hmm.
okay. And finally, I'm just about the farms thing. It made me, some of the conversation made me wonder. I know it's such a focus in community schools to really work in many ways, obviously with families, but in particular to make sure that in fact, sometimes just cultural barriers around signing up for farms. There's a lot of work around that. So I would be curious. I know we're going to be looking at some data at some point from our community schools and really sort of seeing what's come out of now several years of having community schools. I would be interested to see if it's possible. What are the correlations with farms rates? Are we seeing are we seeing them go up in those early years and then continue? What registrations go up as opposed to just a significant change in population?
Yeah.
Though I'm sure that has an
I
impact.
I
as
will
well.
point out one of the big changes we saw was Medicaid enrollment became a direct certification.
Right.
And that was actually really captured a lot of our middle and high school families who traditionally may not have
Don't.
filled out the paperwork. And so
Right.
that was a big change for us and everybody around the state too. So I think that would and then since we're talking about this, a plug, part of the blueprint was that the state was supposed to undertake a study to come up with a better metric
Better
to
measure,
measure
yeah.
poverty. That report's been out for a few years, but has not translated into any sort of funding formula change as it
Right.
relates to that new structure around census tracking, which is, I think what we all deem more accurate depiction of poverty and concentrations of poverty. But so we are still stuck with free and reduced price meals for the time being as the metric of choice to determine poverty.
Which it was never intended.
Never intended.
do.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, well, that's, to be determined, at some point, hopefully we'll start getting better numbers on that. Thank you all very, very much. I know we've peppered you with a lot tonight, but it is much appreciated. Thank you.
Ms. Shalheim.
Yes, I want to go back to tutoring and homework help. It's my understanding that that was built into the operating budget for this current fiscal year,
Correct. So
correct?
so homework help was.
Homework help
Yes.
was.
The tutoring that
Not
we've been
tutoring.
discussing during the school day with Ben is not. It is still being funded through a tutoring grant
Okay.
that will expire. And
Thank
so,
you
yes,
for-
as Ms. Catalano alluded to, her team's kind of doing a holistic look at the tutoring offerings, and I'm sure we'll come with some sort of recommendation moving forward. I will take this opportunity, if you don't mind, Ms. Shalheim, to also make a pitch. Within the blueprint legislation, there's a program called Transitional Supplemental Instruction, which specifically funded tutoring in grades K through 3, intense, no more than 4 students per tutor. That funding peaked in fiscal 24 and is now declining per the legislation. And so I think a pitch again to our colleagues at the General Assembly would be to at least, attempt to restore that funding, because it'll further decline in fiscal 26. And then the idea was that the funding go away in fiscal 27. This obviously, this sort of sunset was envisioned back in 2017 before the pandemic was even a
Dreamt of.
thought. Right. And so I think this should be a strategy we all take with our colleagues around the state to fight to restore that funding source.
Yeah, put it in the budget. I'll support it. But to be clear, the homework help is in there,
Correct.
and then looking at innovative ways to make sure that that is being taken advantage of, because as I'm not a helicopter parent, but I'm engaged. I care, and so I did pull it up. I did find the link. I did have it displayed for my child to take advantage of. That might not be the same in every household. So there's that. And then And then I know transportation, and there's pressure on that, but seeing if any of the schools can make use of it again at school, be done
Yeah,
with that, and then I don't know. It just
Yeah, national studies on
Us.
tutoring, the most effective is during the school day,
yeah. Well,
right?
then,
And
there you
because
go.
you eliminate the transportation barrier,
there you go.
the
Yeah.
family choice
Kids don't
barrier, right, is removed as well. And so it's really that's really kind of the biggest bang for your buck. And so we'll have to look to see where within our schedule where we can fit it in and get the resources to continue it.
And going back to the data gathering, I'm right there with Mr. Silkworth that that the forms drop off, I think, substantially in middle and high school, and it's not like they found a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and are no longer in that predicament. So, making sure we continue to impress upon families the need to fill that out, just like we try to, I think, still impress upon families to fill out the federal, whatever it is,
The impact
Yeah.
aid. Yep.
which I have to imagine isn't being pushed like it should, because I got one email buried in a bunch of emails, and only because I knew what it was that I opened it and filled it out. So to be sure that we still take advantage of every nickel and dime we find on the pavement is a good thing, because I know that helps inform some funding. But yeah, to Dr. Tobin's point, it was a point I was going to make. Like, I get that parents are upset. I understand it. That's why I raised concerns. But in order to really fix it, we gotta fix the law. So let's fix the dang law, and then we won't have to have this convo, and it can be equitable on all days that we're in school, because it'll be full days all the time with none of this other stuff. And I also imagine that parents look at our calendar and figure out where the half days are, and I'm sure attendance takes a dip on those days too. And so it'll help our numbers there as well. So it's not just we don't want to go to school until July and we want recess on all days. It's we want kids to come to school on all days and not hit the easy button. You can have a duvet day, as they say across the pond, and just kick it at home, because you're not going to learn much on an early dismissal day anyway, is the common thought. I don't subscribe to that. My kid goes to school, but just saying, it'll help our numbers, and then we can, when we report out our attendance, hopefully this time next year or later in the year next year, we can say, look, we don't have these peaks and valleys anymore. Again, gratitude. Thank you so much for this. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Shelheim. So, putting on my teacher hat again, I can say that having been around a few years, we have done more in the past 7 to 10 years to help provide tutoring and services, our plus periods, and all of the other things that have been done in our schools to help our students. I mean, if I think about where I was 30 years ago, and I mean, we weren't even talking about providing that kind of help. So having said that, I'm going to give Dr. Bedell an opportunity if he wants to say something in closing, but do you want to say something now?
No, sir.
Okay, if you change your mind. But I just want to say that Anne Arundel County is well positioned, in my mind, to implement the mandates of the Maryland Blueprint, which is the law. We are so fortunate to be the good system that we are. I am thankful for this superintendent. I am thankful for this staff in front of me and over off to my right, and those that are not here. I am thankful for our teachers and our great students and our admin out there. I'm thankful for the families And I'm also thankful for this Board of Ed. We will find a way to advocate for the needs of all of our students and families. How are we going to do that? Well, by collaborating, working together, agreeing to disagree if we have to, listening to one another, and agreeing to focus on improving student outcomes for all of our students. In a recent MABE conference last week, I have to tell you that so many of our fellow Board of Ed members across the state are frustrated. And they are extremely frustrated. Why? Because there's not an appropriate commitment from some of their stakeholders in their counties, and particularly some of their funding sources. We've had some great commitments here, but we're not done. The needs of our kids will continue to be at the forefront. But I just want everybody to know, in Anne Arundel County, we're in a great place. So let's continue to work to collaborate and to advocate for our students. And having said that, once again, thank you all so much. Thank you all out there for being with us. One announcement, our Board of Ed will meet this Wednesday. We have a 4:30 p.m. closed session and a 6:30 p.m. session here in the boardroom. So thank you all for being with us. Have a great night.
I'll roll with you.